Good morning. It's a beautiful morning and a great day to serve the Lord. In Titus chapter 1, verse number 15, it says, "Unto the pure all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure, but even their mind and conscience is defiled." And then in Galatians chapter 5, verse number 9, Paul says, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. This morning we're going to be looking at the next hook in our series, Hook, Line, and Sinker. The next hook here, as we look at this, is to pollute and to plunder. We've already taken a look at some of the other hooks that our enemy will use to trick and to destroy the Christian family. This is one that he uses very, very effectively in the Christian home, and it is to pollute and to plunder. And it's very important for us as Christians and God's people to establish certain things in our home in order to protect against pollution that may come up from the world that's around us. So let's jump into this lesson number 1, internal corruption, or lesson 12 rather. Lesson 12, internal corruption. And we'll begin with point number 1, recognizing the evil within. You see, this verse mentions here in Galatians, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Sin starts with something small and it grows from the inside. Sin in the heart is much like an infection in the body. Left to itself, it's going to get worse and worse and become potentially devastating. Often an infection does much damage before it is diagnosed and before it's treated. In the same way, once Satan has access to your child, to your family, he will always try to infect the spiritual heart with the world's corruption. The Bible refers to this internal sin infection in Romans chapter 7. So that's letter A. We have an internal sin infection. The Bible refers to it in Romans 7, verse number 17, where it says, "Now then it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now if I do that I would not, then it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. I find then a law, that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity, into the law of sin, which is in my members." The first step to killing the sin infection is regaining joy. Regaining joy is recognizing that it's in you, but the infection is not you. Letter B, sin is not who you are, but rather it's what is inside you. As a Christian, I am made a saint. I'm not a sinner that sometimes sins, that sometimes receives grace. No, I'm a saint that sometimes sins, and I have to live in light of the grace of God. The infection, even though you have sin in you, it's not you. It's not who you are, because God has made you a new creature. In the coming lesson, we're going to expose this process of spiritual corruption. Your enemy will attempt to corrupt you on the inside so he can change you on the outside. He will plant an internal spiritual infection that's going to wreak havoc on your life and on your family. You honestly won't even know what hit you or where it's coming from, but it's going to devastate your life. This third hook that families and parents are struggling with and swallowing huge hook, line, and sinker. The first one is family fragmentation. The second one is rebellion against authority. And this third hook, corruption of the heart. They all work together to form a tightly woven trap to trap our homes and our families. This hook of internal corruption, it defies the heart, it addicts the inner man, and then it literally rewrites the attitude of the heart and the resulting actions. Letter C, Satan will attempt to corrupt you on the inside so he can change you on the outside. The internal corruption comes at us in a multitude of ways, in millions of varieties, but the net effect is the same. It redefines who I am on the inside, and in turn redefines how I look and how I behave on the outside. This lie is incredibly subtle because it's spiritual in nature, seemingly harmless upon ingestion, and it silently works. It transforms effortlessly and then redefines who I am with seemingly no internal warnings. It takes time too. This isn't an overnight thing that takes place. No, it often takes months and years before the effects are in place. With this corruption, the devil is exceedingly patient. He is content to work slowly and gradually and methodically. Your enemy would love to sneak an infection into your spiritual heart. He has tricky ways of doing this without you even realizing. As the infection settles in, it changes how you think, how you feel, and what you desire. This literally happens without you even realizing it. He has ways to numb you in the process. His tools and devices, they deaden the spiritual sense and then reprogram the heart with a new attitude. The enemy's corruption lodges deep in the heart, where it can root and grow without detection. For a period of time on the surface, yet Satan's trick seems harmless and even enjoyable. Yet over time, they corrupt and reprogram the heart. Before identifying what this hook is, I want you to understand what it does and how it does it. We'll unveil it specifically later in the lesson, but this hook of corruption is so powerful that I truly believe that it's public enemy number one for Christian homes and Christian young people. It seems harmless on the surface, yet it is destructive spiritually as any other forces I know of. Letter D, internal corruption in time will completely change who you are spiritually. That's why it is so devastating and so dangerous. This hook, it's redefining influence on the spiritual heart. Very similar to how drugs or alcohol redefine a reality in the human brain. What drugs and alcohol do to the mind and to the physical body, this corruption does to the heart spiritually. This is what makes it so much more dangerous than a physical substance. At least when a person is drunk or under the control of some mind-altering substance, you can see the physical signs and you can take appropriate actions. But whenever the heart is corrupt and messed up, when it's hidden below the surface, it leaves you wondering what's wrong with the person. The effects are seen, but it's usually not tied to the hidden cause. When a person comes under these seemingly harmless spiritual influences, there are no immediate physical signs. That's why we reason them as harmless. Yet they're absolutely destructive in an invisible way. The corruption happens within. The vision becomes skewed and the heart is drunken, and all that's taking place underneath the surface. All the while on the surface, the warning signs are rarely taken seriously enough. It's as though a deadly cancer is eating away on the inside while we diagnose the common cold or cough or something going on the outside. Number 2, exposing the spirits of this world. To understand where we're headed, we have to come back to the reality of our spiritual life, the inner man. The spiritual battle for that part of your life, everything that we will uncover in this section will have to do with the alteration and annihilation of a healthy inner man. In other words, you must believe that the spiritual world is more real than the world that you see. That's letter A. The spiritual world is more real than the world that you see. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18, "While we look not at things which are seen, but at things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." Again in Hebrews, God says, "Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen are not made of things which do appear." That's in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 13. Second, we have to realize that, letter B, your spiritual enemy uses devices of the physical world to carry his message into the spiritual being. He uses physical gateways and physical tools to penetrate a spiritual message into your heart. Now look at 1 John chapter 4, verse 6, verse 1 through 6. It said, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know we the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now already is in the world. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. They that are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God, and he that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. There's several truths there we want to call attention to. The first one is right there. It's letter C in your notes. There are two kinds of spirits speaking in the world today: the Spirit of God and those spirits not of God. They're doing battle and they're speaking into your homes and into your hearts and into your life. Again, this verifies that there is a spiritual battle going on. The lies and the deception that are going on are taking place as long as we live on this planet. As long as you're alive, that battle is going to be taking place in you. The second, John repeatedly reminds us that we are of God. That's letter D. We are of God and should give our ears to a different voice. He is emphatically saying that there are some spirits that we have nothing to do with, because we're of another spirit. We're of a different spirit. In fact, God has gone through great lengths to help us overcome these spirits. Remember, we're not talking about Casper the Friendly Ghost here. We're talking about bait, hook, battle, deception, lies, and spiritual butchery. These ungodly spirits intend to lead you astray, to lie to you, and to destroy you. Third, he assures us that God is greater than these spirits. Oh, I'm so thankful. God's greater than these spirits in our lives. In actuality, they are not something that we need to fear. It's just something that we need to be aware of and avoid. The most important application I want to draw from this passage is found in verse 5 and 6, where it says, "Ye are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error." Think about this. The spirits of this world actually speak, and the world hear them. These spiritual entities, enemies of the cross, actually have voices that can be heard in a physical realm, voices that are pleasant enough to be listened to. Obviously, destructive power of these voices is masked by something much more attractive. The bait always is something that the fish want. As they speak, clearly and physically, and the world hears them. Think about that. The world listens to and absorbs physically and understands and accepts these voices as voices to be trusted and voices to be followed. In the next verse, John says that we who are of God have given our ears to a different source, the Word of God, the truth of God, and those who speak His truth. Amazing. John so clearly tells us that in the world, we're going to be surrounded by voices of the ungodly spirits, speaking and being heard by the world. Then he reminds us that we are of God and we should give our ears to different voices. Finally, letter F, you must recognize the certain significance of this heart-level corruption that we speak of. D is this: it's protect your heart from internal corruption by giving your ears to the right voices. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, "Keep thine heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." In Proverbs chapter 23, verse 19, he says, "Hear, my son, and be wise. Guide thy heart in the way." Letter G. Let me say this before we say letter G. Your heart is the source of the wellspring of life. Letter G. Satan wants your heart first because it's the wellspring of life. If the devil can corrupt your heart, it's only a matter of time before he will destroy your entire life. It's only a matter of time before he will reinvent you without even knowing it, without you even knowing it. In fact, he would rather destroy you slowly from within than quickly from without. He is after spiritual destruction. He wants to build a stronghold in your heart, and then he will fight you through that stronghold as long as he can, undetected by you. It's amazing. This is his master tactic at sneaking in upon us from within. You don't see him, you don't hear him, you don't feel him, you don't sense him. You just think you're taking in some harmless voices. But at the core, you're opening up your spirit to the destroyer. We're often completely blind to this process. In fact, even after years of youth ministry and years of seeing children and family, I often find myself blind to this hook. As I'm trying to help families and trying to lead families, Sometimes, after hours of counseling and exploring life issues, it seems that the Lord finally lifts the veil, and the enlightenment that Paul spoke of finally, the true issues come out on the surface so clearly and plainly. Nearly every single time, this hook is somewhere near the roots. In recent years, this hook is often where I go first and whenever we start and begin to counseling. It's always right there, hidden from view but tightly lodged in the inner man. Your heart is literally your mind, your will, your emotions, in other words, your thinker, your chooser, and your feeler. It is who you really are at the innermost being. Through these voices, the enemy can literally influence, alter, and control your mind, your thoughts, your desires, and your feelings. Consider this for a moment. As I know, many young people, many people, some that we're going to talk about in later lessons, they've literally been driven to thoughts of destruction, desires towards suicides, emotions of despair, because of the voices that we look at. All of these reside in the heart, the place where the parents and pastors cannot see their existence. That's a pretty powerful hook. As we delve into these principles, we have to recognize parents and teens and children are both susceptible to these voices on a daily basis and the corruption of the mind. This is letter H. Parents, you and your children are both susceptible to this. The process of corruption, it works equally well on both. In fact, the corruption is most effective when it's happening to both you and your children at the same time. It aids in family fragmentation even more. In the next lesson, we're going to look at the process of this corruption. But I want to point out the fact that right now, parents, now is the important time for us to begin to delve out the corruption in our own life. And you may think, well, wait a second, there's not a lot of corruption in my own life. How much corruption does there have to be in order for it to be bad? How much toilet water do you have to drink before you find that toilet water is disgusting? And it's a simple... How much arsenic do you have to have in your tea in order for you to think your tea is no longer good for you to drink? A little tiny corruption does a whole lot of damage. So we're going to look at this hook. Find the process of corruption and see how we can weed it out in our houses and in our lives so that we can have God-honoring spiritual homes, homes of joy, homes of freedom from guilt and sin. So we'll be continuing that lesson. Wow, what an amazing hook. A hook that can destroy lives and families, but a hook that's so ingrained in us that it's hard for us to recognize. I pray that as we jump into this, that we will recognize these sources of corruption and we'll choose to do something about them.